Okay, we're now in part 5 of God's personality, and I've picked 5 P's to go with the P of personality to sort of summarize things about God that people don't really seem to understand. I mean, I think we all come to understand this, but the sooner you understand it, the happier you're going to be in your relationship with God. But they're all pretty shocking P's, okay? The 5 P's that I've decided to list are: number 1, paradoxical. The difference between a paradox and a contradiction is that two opposites are joined. And this is by divine will. We covered that in the first 3 parts and in the 4 parts of part 4. God has this thing, because he's infinite, about all the high and all the low being joined, and he joins them, each high to each low, at all points along a spectrum, which leads to the second P about God's personality, and that is that he's punctiliar. I'm going to give you examples, but I want to summarize this first. So the first P is paradoxical, joining of opposites. The second P is punctiliar. In other words, each point of a high is mated to a low, from highest to lowest, okay? The highest of God to the lowest of the low, which of course is the cross. The third P is punning, and this is very important. It's God mirrors everything. You hear the theologians make God boring. Okay, they think that makes him majestic, and that's very unfortunate, because one of the most important things about God you can find out is he has this terrific sense of humor. So he is constantly punning in the Hebrew and the Greek. Okay, but they wipe all that out in translation. So you miss God's constant humor even at really inappropriate times. He's constantly making jokes. And he's making jokes particularly in a punning nature. And all the punishments that we get are of a punning nature. So the punning character of God is really important to know. So we're going to go through that. It's a version of restitution. It's a version of redemption. It's a version of mirroring back to you something in a language you can understand. But it's also his very nature. He has this sense of humor about matching opposites, but he does it in a punning manner. All right? That's the third P of God. So the first was paradoxical, the second is punctiliar, and the third is punning. The fourth, which I was sort of leading up to, is playful. God is very playful. Okay, you get your hint of that by the way he puns everything. Okay, punning being a form of mirroring. Okay, and everything he does, from the way he orchestrates time, which theology knows nothing about. I'm the only one, as far as I can tell, who understands this doctrine still yet. From the way he orchestrates time to the way he did the cross, it's playful. I mean, Hebrews 5, 8, and 9 is a joke in the Greek. Imathen, ipathen. Okay, but he learned through what he suffered on the cross is the translation. Okay, and he makes a joke of that, which leads therefore to the fourth, that's the fourth P, playful. So you got paradoxical, punctiliar, punning, playful, and then that leads to number 5, which is Isaiah 54:1. God is very politically incorrect. And what's really a travesty in the translations is that wherever God is politically incorrect, they cover it up. All right? He says things about finance and about wealth, which are politically incorrect to humans. And they cover it up in the translation. They bland it out. This is very, pro-wealth. God is very much pro-wealth because he's God. He ought to be pro-wealth. And they cover that up. He's pro-military. And the theologians cover it up in their translations. Okay? He uses a lot of sexual words, especially in Isaiah 53. That's all covered up in the translation. Alright? He depicts the cross as a rape. That's covered up in the translation. Isaiah specializes in using the min preposition there. Okay? And the Hebrew verb ana, which has a strong sexual connotation, plus me'amal nafsho, which is in Isaiah 53, 11, which has to do with labor pains. Okay, all those things are covered up in translation because it's politically incorrect. All right, the translators are prudish, and they cover up God's wording. When it says Adam knew his wife, that's yada in the Hebrew. That's the same verb as to know truth. Okay? And yeah, it's a euphemism, but it's used in the New Testament. Okay, the Greek equivalent of that, of course, is used in the New Testament, and it's talking about marital intimacy. The idea is to have marital intimacy with God. Now, it's not physical sex, but it's the mental intimacy that is characterized in marriage. Okay, but that's all covered up in the translation. And Isaiah 54:1 says, if you can, read it in your favorite translation, it says that, the one who is shamed will have more kids than the one who is legally married. In other words, the one who, meaning Christ, is being depicted there, the guy who was shamed on the cross. As far as the world was concerned, it was an ignominious death. It had no meaning. He was a nobody. Okay, and God will glorify him more. The rejected stone becomes the head of the corner, the basis for the whole building. And that's God's sense of humor. That's his sense of justice. That all of man's ideas about glory and good and all that stuff, he turns them on their head. Even though God is the one who invented morality. Because man takes morality and makes himself, vaunts himself with it. Man glorifies himself with his moralities. Well, man's moralities don't mean anything to God, so God turns morality on its head. And therefore the one who is shamed will have more kids than her who is legally married. That's Isaiah 54:1. That's a quintessential statement about God's personality. He loves turning things on their head. Now, those are the 5 P's. We'll go through them again. Paradoxical. That's number 1. Number 2, punctiliar. Number 3, punning. Number 4, playful. And number 5, above all, politically incorrect. And Peter really picked up on the politically incorrect because he goes out of his way to use politically incorrect Greek. And the people who say that Peter needed an amanuensis and they didn't speak Greek well, they didn't know how to read him properly. Peter's very good at Greek. He's so good that he knows how to misuse it. Alright, and actually each one of the NT writers deliberately misuses the Greek in certain places to make a point. Paul gets coarse. John is a little more elegant, but he makes his own games. And the writer of Hebrews, okay, they all tweak the Greek. They know how, because they know it that well. And Peter is extremely politically incorrect, because he was so Jewish. And that's one of the big lessons he learned, was that God's politically incorrect. So he loves to play games with the Greek in his own, the 2 letters that he wrote. So these are the 5 characteristics of God that people don't know about, and you need to know about them in your spiritual life, and you come to learn them. Now, in your spiritual life, like I said in the earlier parts of the video, God being high and low, and the spiritual life being how God's going to do to you what he did to Christ, okay, and make your soul bigger by stretching it, by progressively mating the highs and lows, what you consider highs and lows, getting them closer and closer together like labor pains over the course of your life. That process, okay, also exhibits these 5 P characteristics.